The gunshot tore through the dusty evening like a scream, and Elena Hart froze with her hand still on the saloon door. She had heard plenty of gunfire in her 30 years on ranches, in cattle towns, on the long roads where men carried grudges like whiskey in their pockets, but something about this one hit differently. It wasn't a warning shot. It wasn't a drunken challenge. It was a shot meant to make someone kneel. The saloon doors swung open on their own as a woman rushed out, nearly colliding with her. Elena steadied her, noting the terror in her eyes. "They're beating him," the woman whispered before scurrying away like a frightened rabbit. "Beating who?" Elena stepped inside. The saloon of Red Valley Crossing smelled of spilled whiskey, wet tobacco, and the iron tang of blood. Lamps flickered weakly, casting long, jagged shadows across the wooden floor. Every table was abandoned, every patron crowded around a space near the bar. A circle, a spectacle. A fight that wasn't a fight at all, because only one person was standing. Sheriff Bullard, a thick-bodied man with fists like butcher's slabs, loomed over a man on the floor. The man was shirtless, his skin streaked with dust and fresh bruises. Muscles rippled under his bronzed skin, not ornamental muscle, but the hard-earned kind from hauling, climbing, running, surviving. His long black hair hung loose, matted with sweat. A metal shackle bit into his left wrist, still attached to a snapped chain he must have broken earlier. Someone had painted a crude word across his chest in white ash. Savage Elena's heart clenched. No, not this again. Not another human treated like livestock. The sheriff lifted his boot and stomped on the man's ribs. The man gasped but didn't cry out. His eyes stayed locked on the sheriff, dark, unflinching, more insulted than broken. Next stomp cracked something important, Bullard growled, wiping sweat from his bald head. "Someone's got to pay for the trouble he caused." "He didn't cause no trouble," a ranch hand muttered. "You just don't like," Bullard backhanded him. The saloon went silent. Elena stepped forward before thinking. "What's happening?" Bullard turned. The crowd parted instinctively at the sight of Elena, tall, sharp-featured, brown-haired, wearing a tailored riding jacket she bought in New Orleans and a holster she'd had since she was 17. Elena Hart. Bullard's lip curled. "Figures you'd show up right when trouble needs defending. I asked a question." "This filthy half-wild stray tried to break free," Bullard said, pointing at the man with his boot. "Nearly killed 2 of my men." The man on the ground spat blood. "You call chains freedom?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. Bullard's face went red, then purple. "He stays chained until the buyer arrives," the sheriff snapped. "A man with no owner is trouble." "Been that way forever," Elena inhaled sharply. "Owner? He's a person. He ain't civilized." Bullard's eyes hardened. "Law says he can be detained and sold to cover the fine for violent resistance." Elena couldn't believe what she was hearing. This wasn't the East. This wasn't even civilized West. This was Red Valley, a place where the law bent around the sheriff like metal in a forge. "How much is the fine?" Elena asked. Bullard blinked. "Why?" "Because I'm paying it." The room erupted. "The hell you are. You don't even know his name." "She always saves strays." Bullard silenced them with a raised hand. "You?" He laughed. "You want this one? He ain't trainable. He ain't tame. He'll tear your barn apart by morning." "I didn't ask your opinion," she said coolly. She knelt beside the man. Close up, he didn't look wild. He looked exhausted, bleeding, cornered like an animal because someone forced him into that corner. "Can you stand?" she asked gently. His eyes studied her, suspicious, confused, but not hostile. "Why do you care?" Because a long time ago, Elena's older brother had also been beaten by men who called him worthless. because she knew the look of someone who expected no kindness, because she couldn't walk away, but she didn't tell him that. Instead, she said, "Because you shouldn't die on this floor." He didn't answer, but his fingers twitched as if preparing to push himself up. Bullard shoved Elena back with his boot. "You don't get near him unless you pay first." The entire saloon watched. She stood, eyes locked with the sheriff's. "What's the amount?" Bullard grinned. $100. Gasps. "That's robbery." "Bullard's macking it up." Bullard shrugged innocently. "Riot damage is expensive." Elena didn't break eye contact. She opened her satchel slowly and took out a stack of bills. She counted them on the nearest poker table. Bullard's grin faded with every bill she dropped. "Stop. No, I said 100. "Then take 100, she said, placing the last bill on the table with a crisp snap. Bullard hesitated, then lunged for the money like a starving wolf. "It's done then," she said. "It's done," he muttered. "Good." Elena turned. "Don't hurt him," she said loudly to the sheriff. "He's mine now." The room went silent again, but this time in disbelief. As she knelt a second time, the man looked at her with a new expression, not gratitude, not trust, but something sharper. Confusion mixed with a cautious flicker of hope. "I don't belong to anyone," he whispered. "And I don't own people," she replied. "Let's just get you out of here." She helped him stand, looping his unchained arm over her shoulder. His body heat radiated like a furnace. She could feel the tremors in his muscles, not fear, but restraint. He leaned close, breath shaky. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "Nothing," she said softly. "You don't owe me anything." His expression wavered. The idea seemed foreign to him. She guided him through the silent crowd. Everyone moved aside, except one man. Marshal Dean Calder, tall, polished, and smiling that cold politician smile. "Elena," he greeted. "Playing savior again?" "Stay out of it, Dean." Calder's eyes flicked to the man in chains. "He'll bring you trouble. Men like him always do." Elena shot him a glare. "Trouble usually comes from men like you." The crowd oohed, but quietly. Elena pushed past him, helping the beaten man out of the saloon and into the open air. The sunset painted the street crimson and gold. "What's your name?" she asked. The man hesitated, then quietly answered, "Raven." She nodded. "Raven, I'm Elena." He exhaled slowly, as if tasting the name. Before she could say more, a rider galloped down the street at full speed, dust rising behind him like smoke. "Elena!" the rider shouted. "They're coming for him, a whole group of bounty men. They say he escaped a massacre site." Raven stiffened, his body tensing beneath her arm. She didn't recognize the look in his eyes now. It wasn't fear. It was the expression of a man preparing for war. The warning shout hadn't even finished echoing through Red Valley Crossing when Raven jerked away from Elena, instinct snapping through him like a whip. His eyes swept the open street, the rooftops, alleys, the sun sliding low behind the hills. "They tracked me," he said, breath sharp. "Faster than I thought. Who's coming?" Elena asked. Raven didn't answer at first. He looked like a man standing on the edge of an old nightmare. The rider who'd brought the warning dismounted and rushed toward them. There may be 15-minute outblood trail riders, the kind that don't ask questions before they shoot. Elena tightened her grip on Raven's arm. He flinched, not from pain but from the instinct to run, to vanish. "You're hurt," she said. "You won't make it far if you go alone." Raven met her eyes. "I run better alone." "And die faster alone," she replied. He hesitated. Then a gun clicked behind them. Sheriff Bullard stood in the saloon doorway, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. That slick, satisfied smirk spread across his face when he saw Raven on his feet. "Well, ain't this perfect timing?" the sheriff drawled. "The Blood Riders can take him off my hands without me doing a thing." Elena straightened. "He's not yours anymore." Bullard hefted his rifle. "He's worth more alive to them than $100 is to me." Raven tensed. Elena stepped between them before he could move. "You shoot him," she said calmly, "and you'll have to explain to every witness here that you killed a man I legally paid for." Bullard's eyes narrowed. "I make the law here." "No," Elena said. "You pretend you do." The sheriff's face turned red, then purple again, but before he could speak, Marshal Calder pushed through the onlookers with slow, confident steps. "Elena," the marshal said with a smile that never reached his eyes, "once again, you've inserted yourself into matters best left alone." "Raven is hurt," she said, "and he's under my protection now." Calder studied Raven carefully, too carefully. There was something calculating behind his stare. "These Blood Riders aren't your average bounty hunters," Calder said. "They're hired hunters from the territories north of here. Men paid to retrieve one particular person." Raven's jaw clenched. Elena didn't miss it. "They're coming for him specifically." "Why?" Calder hesitated. "Not long, but long enough." "That's not information for you," he finally said. "So you know why they want him," Elena said. "And you let Sheriff Bullard chain him up and beat him?" Calder's polite mask cracked briefly. "Some men need taming." Raven's fist tightened. Elena touched his arm lightly to steady him. Calder continued, "Give Raven to me now and I'll deliver him to the riders. Peacefully. No guns pointed at the town." Elena stared at him, disbelief blazing hot in her chest. "You want me," she said slowly, "to hand him over to men who will likely torture or kill him." Calder shrugged. "That's not my concern. My concern is keeping this town safe." "And mine is keeping him safe," she said. "Why?" Calder asked. "You barely know him." Elena drew a slow breath. "Sometimes a person doesn't have to be known to be worth saving." Calder's expression changed, mocking, then irritated, then hard. "Stubborn woman," he muttered. "You'll get this whole town killed." Elena ignored him. She turned to Raven. "Can you walk?" She whispered. "I can run," he whispered back. "Good," she nodded once, decisive. "There's a supply shed behind my wagon. We get there, we get you bandaged, and we ride." Raven blinked. "Ride where?" "Away from this town," she said. "Away from the men hunting you." A soft, incredulous sound slipped from Raven, not a laugh, not a sob, something caught between those two fragile places. "You don't know what you're offering," he said. "And you don't know how stubborn I am," she said. Behind them, Marshal Calder spoke sharply. Sheriff Bullard stopped them. Bullard lifted his rifle. Raven moved first. Despite the bruises, the cracked ribs, the bleeding cuts across his arms, he launched forward with startling speed. His hand grabbed Bullard's wrist, twisting the rifle aside just as it fired into the dirt. The crowd scattered in a panicked explosion. Raven shoved Bullard back with enough force to knock him into a watering trough. Elena didn't waste a second. "This way," she shouted. Raven staggered after her. Calder shouted orders behind them. "After them. Do not let him escape." Gunshots cracked in the air as Elena and Raven broke into a sprint down the alley between the saloon and the general store. Dust rose around their boots. Raven winced with every stride, pain dragging him down, but he refused to fall behind. "Elena," he gasped. "Keep going," she said. They reached the back of her wagon. Elena ripped open the shed door, grabbed a roll of bandages, a canteen, and her spare pistol. She tossed the pistol to Raven. He caught it awkwardly with his left hand, the one chained. The metal clinked. "How did you break that chain?" she asked. "I didn't," he said. "Someone else did. Hours before they found me." She stared at him. There was more to this story. Much more. But no time now. Gunman rounded the corner. "Move!" Elena grabbed Raven's arm and shoved him behind the wagon as bullets peppered the dirt around them. Raven's body shielded hers instinctively. He fired a warning shot that sent the attackers ducking. "Elena, get on!" he shouted. She threw the bandages into the wagon bed and scrambled onto the driver's seat. Raven leapt up beside her, grabbing the reins as she kicked the brake free. "Hiya!" The horses surged forward. They burst out of the alley just as Marshal Calder's men reached the mouth of it. "Elena!" Calder bellowed. "You're making a catastrophic mistake." But the wagon was already halfway down the north road, wheels rattling violently as Raven snapped the reins hard. Elena didn't look back. Raven did. And what he saw turned his skin cold. A dust storm forming on the horizon, fast, heavy, rising in a pattern no natural wind made. Hooves, 12, 24, maybe more. "Elena!" His voice tightened. "They're here." Elena glanced over her shoulder. Her breath caught. A line of riders broke over the ridge like a wave faces covered. Rifles slung across their bodies, horses black as night and fast as devils. "The Blood Riders," Raven murmured. "How far will they follow?" she asked. "They don't stop," he said. "Not until?" He paused. "Until what?" Raven didn't answer. Elena didn't press. But the fear in his eyes told her enough. They were hunting him specifically. "Hold the reins," she said, grabbing the canteen. "I need to pat your side before you bleed out." Raven gave her a brief, startled look. "You'll fall if I—" "Raven," she said softly but firmly. "Trust me for 1 minute." Something flickered in him, wariness, disbelief, and a fragile thread of trust forming where none had ever been before. He took the reins. Elena ripped open his torn sleeve and pressed the canteen to his side. The water washed away dirt and blood. Raven hissed but stayed still. "Elena!" He whispered. "What?" "You should have left me." She tied the bandages tightly around his ribs. "Not in my nature." "You don't understand," he said. "Those men, those riders, they're not after a bounty. They're after a message." "What message?" "That I shouldn't exist." Elena froze. Raven didn't elaborate. The wagon lurched as a bullet whistled past them, clipping the edge of the driver's seat. "They're gaining," Raven shouted, handing her the reins. Elena took them, her face set in a determined, unyielding line. "Then we don't stop," she said. "Not for anything." Raven lifted her spare pistol, bracing himself despite the pain. "Elena," he said quietly, almost too softly to hear over the pounding hooves behind them. "Yes? If we survive this, I'll tell you everything." She nodded. "Then hold on," she said, "because I'm not letting you die today." And together they fled into the burning horizon with the Blood Riders closing in and a secret in Raven's past growing darker with every passing second. The wagon bucked violently as it tore across the dry flats north of Red Valley Crossing, wheels thundering over hard-packed earth. Elena leaned forward in the driver's seat, urging the horses onward, her jaw clenched tight. Wind whipped her hair across her face, dust burning her eyes, but she didn't dare blink. Behind them, the Blood Riders were closing in. Raven knelt in the wagon bed, bracing himself with one hand against the boards while the other gripped the pistol. Sweat slicked his skin, mixing with dirt and blood under the hastily wrapped bandages. His breathing hitched in shallow, painful bursts. "Elena!" Raven shouted over the roaring wind. "They're splitting!" She risked a glance back. The riders were dividing into two flanking lines, one sweeping wide to the left, one to the right, forming a tightening crescent that threatened to encircle the wagon. "Damn," she breathed. "They're hurting us." "Toward the bluff up ahead," Raven said. His voice was flat, resigned. "A trap." Elena refused to accept that. "Not yet it isn't." She snapped the reins again, guiding the horses toward a narrow ravine cleaving the earth like a scar. It was a tight channel, barely wide enough for the wagon, but it offered cover from bullets. Raven realized her intent. "We might get stuck." "We might get shot if we don't," she replied. The gap loomed closer, jagged rock walls rising on either side like broken teeth. The wagon shot into the ravine with a bone-rattling jolt. Dust exploded around them as the wheels scraped rock. Gunfire echoed from above, riders firing down into the ravine. Raven returned fire, forcing two riders to pull back. But for every shot he fired, 3 bullets cracked down toward them from shifting angles. "We can't stay in here," Raven said, eyes scanning the ridgeline. "They'll pin us." "I know," Elena said, guiding the horses around a curve. "We just need enough distance to." The wagon lurched violently. A wheel clipped a jutting stone, sending Raven tumbling sideways. Elena felt the reins rip from her hands. The horses screamed. The wagon tipped. For a heartbeat, Elena saw sky where ground should be. The world flipped. Dust, splintering wood. The shattering crash of the wagon rolling onto its side. Then silence, except for the distant thunder of hooves. "Elena!" Raven's voice reached her through the haze. She forced her eyes open. The wagon lay on its side, half crushed. Elena was pinned against the tilted frame, her leg trapped between a broken plank and the driver's seat. Pain flared through her thigh. I'm here," she said through clenched teeth. Raven crawled toward her, wincing. His own breathing was ragged. The crash had torn open his bandages, darkening them with fresh blood. "I need to get you out," he said. "You need to get yourself out." She nodded toward the ravine mouth where the riders' shadows were growing. "They're almost here." Raven didn't spare a glance. He shoved against the broken plank, muscles straining. Elena winced but didn't cry out. "You'll tear your stitches," she said. Raven didn't answer. The plank shifted a little. "Not enough." "Elena," he said softly, "I'm not leaving you." His tone startled her, steady, certain, filled with something fierce and unyielding. She shook her head. "Raven, you don't owe me. This isn't a debt," he snapped. "It's who I am." Another shadow passed overhead. Voices echoed down the ravine. The riders were dismounting. Raven grabbed a jagged piece of wood and wedged it under the broken frame, using leverage to pry the section upward. His arms trembled, but the wood creaked upward an inch. Elena gasped as her leg came free. Raven grabbed her hands and pulled her from the wreck, steadying her when she swayed. "Can you walk?" he asked. "I can run," she said stubbornly. Raven gave her a strange look, admiration, disbelief, and worry all mixed together, but he didn't argue. They scrambled deeper into the ravine, moving along a winding path that narrowed into a natural tunnel. The riders' voices echoed behind them. "They're tracking us," Raven said. "They'll follow the blood. Yours or mine?" Elena asked breathlessly. "Both," he admitted. The tunnel emptied into a hidden valley, a quiet bowl of land surrounded by steep rock walls. Sagebrush grew in clusters, and a dry stream wound across the floor like a pale ribbon. Elena staggered but kept going. Raven steadied her again. "Where does this lead?" she asked. "Nowhere," Raven said. "Dead end." She stared at him. "How do you know?" Raven hesitated, then spoke words he'd been avoiding since she met him. "Because I've been here before." Elena's breath caught. When? Raven looked toward the center of the valley. Shadows flickered across his expression. Grief, fear, memories he wished he could bury. It was my home, he whispered. Elena's chest tightened. Raven walked forward slowly, each step heavier than the last. He knelt beside a cluster of stones arranged in a circle. Dust coated them. Weather had worn them down, but they were unmistakably placed by human hands. A burial ring. Or many. Elena lowered herself beside him. Your family? She asked gently. Raven didn't speak for several seconds. His throat bobbed once. They were here, he said finally. My whole band. My people. Before the riders found them. Elena felt a cold shiver crawl down her spine. The Blood Riders? She whispered. No, Raven's voice hardened. The riders work for someone worse. Elena stared at him. Who? Raven met her gaze. His eyes, always sharp and guarded, now glimmered with something else, sorrow carved deep into bone. Marshal Calder. Elena went cold. Raven continued, his voice low and steady. He led a patrol into this valley. Said my people were raiding cattle lines. It wasn't true. We hunted deer. We trapped small game. We lived quietly. He touched one of the stones gently, reverently. They killed everyone anyway. Elena covered her mouth, blinking hard. She had suspected corruption in Calder, but not this. Not extermination. Not murder hidden behind law and badge. How did you survive? She whispered. Raven's eyes darkened. I wasn't here. I came back to find only smoke, bodies, tracks of the men who killed them. He swallowed hard, voice roughening. I followed those tracks for weeks, and when I found them, they ambushed me. I killed two. They captured me anyway, dragged me to Red Valley Crossing in chains, told the sheriff I was dangerous. Elena closed her eyes. A sickening realization spread through her. Calder wants you dead because your existence proves he massacred innocent people. Raven nodded once. He wants the last witness erased. Before Elena could speak, hooves thundered at the tunnel entrance. The riders had arrived. Raven pushed Elena behind the nearest rock outcrop. We can't hide, she whispered. They'll search everywhere. No, Raven said. They won't search. He looked toward the burial rings. They know what this place is. A chill passed through Elena. Then why come here? To finish the dead, Raven said quietly, and to kill what survived. The riders fanned out across the valley floor, rifles raised. Their leader, wearing a dark coat and a face scarf, shouted orders. Raven's hand tightened around the pistol, the only gun they had left. One gun, Elena whispered. Against 20. Raven didn't respond. Instead, he turned to her. You shouldn't have come with me. Elena lifted her chin. You think I'd let them take you? He stared at her, and for the first time since she met him, the guarded edge in his eyes softened. Elena. His voice was low. You gave me something I thought I lost the day my people died. What? A reason to live. She swallowed hard, emotion burning her chest. But before she could respond, a voice echoed across the valley. Raven. Marshal Calder stepped through the tunnel opening, flanked by armed riders. Elena's blood ran cold. Even from a distance, Calder's polished confidence radiated like poison. His coat was spotless. His badge gleamed. His smile was thin, victorious. Elena Hart, Calder called. I should have known you'd be exactly where trouble grows. He raised a gloved hand, and his riders leveled their guns. Raven stepped in front of Elena. Calder smirked. Move aside, Raven. Make this easy. Raven didn't move. Calder sighed dramatically. Very well, Kill them both." Elena drew a sharp breath, and the first shot rang out. The first gunshot shattered the valley's silence like a lightning strike. Elena flinched, instinctively grabbing Raven's arm as the echo ricocheted between the ravine walls. But it wasn't a bullet fired at them. It was a warning shot fired into the air. Raven stared in confusion. The riders hesitated. Even Marshal Calder paused mid-step. Then a rough, furious voice boomed from the mouth of the ravine. "Calder, you lying bastard, you said he broke free. Not that you were marching half an army into my town." "Sheriff Bullard." Elena blinked, stunned. Bullard limped into view atop a borrowed horse, one arm still dripping from his fall earlier, his face red and furious. Behind him were 4 town deputies, all gripping rifles, all looking conflicted but grim. Calder's eyes narrowed, annoyance flashing across his face. "This is no concern of yours," Calder said. "This is government business." Bullard spat into the dust. "My town is my business. You didn't tell me you slaughtered this man's people, or that you were using my jail to tie up loose ends from your dirty work." Elena felt Raven tense beside her, jaw clenching. Calder laughed, soft, cold, unbothered. "Bullard, you're a drunk with a badge and an attitude problem. You were useful, but your usefulness has ended." Bullard stiffened as if slapped. Calder flicked his hand. "Riders, kill the sheriff." But no one moved. The riders glanced at each other, then at Bullard's deputies. For the first time, doubt rippled through their ranks. They weren't loyal to Calder. They were loyal to pay. And fighting a sheriff and deputies meant risk. Real risk. Calder noticed the hesitation and hissed under his breath. "Fine." He drew his gun himself. Elena gasped. "Bullard!" But Raven had already moved. Despite his injuries, he surged forward with the last reserves of his strength. He grabbed Elena, pulling her down behind a rock just as the first bullets flew. Gunfire exploded across the valley. Bullard fired at Calder. Calder fired back. Riders dove for cover. Deputies scattered. Dust clouds burst upward like small storms. Elena ducked with Raven behind the stones, her heart pounding. She grabbed Raven's wrists, guiding him lower as a bullet cracked the rock above them. "You're hit again," she whispered, seeing the dark stain spreading beneath his bandage. "Not yet," Raven muttered, gritting his teeth. "Stay low." Another bullet whizzed so close to Elena's ear that it burned like a bee sting. "We can't stay here," she said. "They'll box us in." "Yes," Raven agreed. "Unless we make them come to us." Before she could ask what he meant, Raven reached down, grabbed a handful of dust and earth, and smeared it across his skin, the old ritual of a warrior preparing for a last stand. "Elena," he said, voice quiet but steady, "if Calder kills me, your name dies with me. He'll call you traitor. He'll take Red Valley. He'll keep killing." He looked her straight in the eyes. "You said you saw a man worth saving. I need to know if you meant it, or if it was just pity." Elena grabbed his face between her hands, pulling him close. "If you die, Raven, then so does the part of me that still believes in the good of this world." Raven stared at her, stunned, softening. Something changed in his eyes. Something healed. Then a shadow fell across them. A rider had spotted their hiding spot. "Elena, down!" Raven shouted. The rider raised his rifle, only to collapse with a scream as Sheriff Bullard tackled him from behind. Bullard groaned as he rolled aside, breathing hard, but alive. Calder snarled from the ridge above. "You're all fools. You're fighting for a savage. A murderer." You murdered his people," Elena shouted, stepping into view. "You murdered his family and blamed them to cover your own greed." Calder jerked his gun toward her. Raven saw it first. No. He lunged forward, shoving Elena aside as Calder fired. The bullet grazed Raven's shoulder, a burst of red, a harsh cry, but he stayed on his feet. Elena aimed Bullard's fallen rifle and fired. The bullet struck the rock near Calder's hand, knocking his gun loose. The marshal cursed, scrambling for cover. "And now," Raven said, breathing hard, "he runs." Calder did exactly that. The marshal bolted up the rock shelf behind him, scrambling toward a narrow ledge that led out of the valley. He moved fast despite the shock, adrenaline fueling him. Raven staggered to his feet. "Raven, wait!" Elena grabbed his arm. "You're too hurt. You can't chase him." He looked back at her, and she realized with a painful twist in her chest that this wasn't about revenge. This was about ending the nightmare. Forever. Raven squeezed her hand briefly. "I come back. I promise." And he went after Calder. Elena watched him climb, her breath stuck in her lungs, her hands shaking. Below, deputies were rounding up disarmed riders. Sheriff Bullard was bleeding badly but barking orders anyway, refusing help with his usual stubbornness. But Elena's eyes stayed fixed on the ridge. On Raven, and on Calder fleeing higher and higher. The final climb, the ridge path wound steeply upward, loose stones skittering under fast steps. Raven moved like a man possessed, despite his injuries, despite the blood dripping from his sleeve. Calder reached the top first. He spun, gasping, raising a small derringer he'd kept hidden. Raven ducked behind a boulder as the shot cracked past him. Calder shouted down, "You should have stayed dead." "I gave this territory order." Raven emerged slowly, hands open, gun dropped. Calder froze. "You killed children," Raven said softly. "There is no order in that." Calder sneered. "You think anyone will believe you over a marshal? You're a ghost of a tribe no one remembers." Raven's voice grew quieter, steadier like the earth settling before an avalanche. "The dead remember. And I remember." He stepped closer. Calder fired his last bullet. It clicked empty. Panic filled the marshal's eyes. Raven closed the distance, one final burst of strength driving him forward. He knocked Calder backward. The two men struggled near the cliff's edge, boots skidding on loose gravel. Calder clawed for a rock, a root, anything. Raven finally pinned him down, breathing hard. "This is for my mother," Raven whispered. Calder's eyes widened. Raven struck him once. Calder went limp. Breathing shakily, Raven pushed the unconscious marshal away from the cliff edge and tied his hands with strips from his own torn shirt. Then he looked down into the valley. Elena was watching. When he met her eyes, she smiled through tears. Aftermath by sundown, deputies escorted the surviving riders into custody. Calder, broken and unconscious, was tied to a horse and hauled back toward Red Valley, where federal agents would be summoned. Sheriff Bullard sat against a rock, groaning as Elena tightened the bandage around his shoulder. "Woman," he grumbled, "I still think you're trouble incarnate. But hell, you saved my life." "And you saved ours," she said. Bullard snorted. "Didn't do it for you. Did it 'cause Calder made me look like a damned fool." Elena smiled faintly. "Whatever the reason. Thank you." As night fell, Raven sat alone at the burial rings. Elena approached quietly, settling beside him. "I thought you weren't coming back," she whispered. He turned to her. "I promised." She exhaled shakily. "You kept it." They sat in silence for a moment, the desert wind brushing past them, carrying the faint scent of sage and dust and memory. Raven finally spoke. "I don't know what happens next," he said. "I have no home, no people." "That's not true," Elena said softly. Raven glanced at her. "You have me." He blinked. Once, slowly, as if letting the words sink deep enough to stay. Elena placed her hand over his. "You're not a prisoner. You're not a fugitive. You're a man who survived the worst thing a human being can survive." Raven looked down at their joined hands. For the first time, his shoulders eased. His breath slowed. His eyes softened. "Elena Hart," he murmured, "you saw a man worth saving." She whispered back, voice trembling but certain, "And I always will." The moon rose above the ridge, casting silver light across the valley, across the graves of the lost, the ruins of old scars, and the two souls sitting side by side. Raven leaned his forehead against hers, not asking, not taking, just finally allowing himself to exist beside another human being without fear. The world had tried to erase him. Elena had refused to let it. And in the quiet of that sacred valley, Raven understood something he had never understood before. Survival wasn't just living. It was being seen,